Vic's Drunken Horror Adventures. This is Travis. Shortly, I'll be joined by Blake, if I'm not already. I have not the studio at the moment. It's kind of been a busy night. It is the night before Halloween. But in my neighborhood, due to the fact that there's going to be quote-unquote severe weather tomorrow night, we did the trick-or-treating tonight. So I took all the little ones trick-or-treating in my neighborhood. My neighborhood's usually the best neighborhood in the area for trick-or-treating, or one of the best. And I don't know. It really fell off because we had to do it October 30th this year. It did not have the, let's say, pizzazz that it usually does. Not so many. Well, I mean, there were plenty of trick-or-treaters out there. There were a whole lot of houses that ran out of candy. Now, granted, I do want to say that I got started late on this whole thing. Blake's here. Let's see.
Hey, I'm
unmute him here. See if we can talk. What's up, buddy?
What's up? I've been listening the past couple of minutes. I've missed the cue on when to unmute myself because I was just finishing up watching Dahmer and I was distracted. I'm sorry.
You were watching Dahmer?
Yeah, I just finished it.
Are you talking about my friend Dahmer?
No, I'm talking about Jeremy Renner's Dahmer.
Ah, okay. I was just curious, because my friend Dahmer's pretty new, and so figured that would be the one you were talking about. But it's good to have you here, Blake. Man, I missed you.
I missed you too, buddy. It's just been sort of crazy. I've been doing a lot of things, but I haven't been forgetting you guys. I've been thinking about the show a lot, and I've done so many other ones lately, and I feel bad that the last time I tried to get on, I just was under the weather, man. Normally I'm there if I'm not sick.
Dude, everybody's been sick lately in my area, so I totally get it. You know what I mean? Plus,
damn weather.
The weather changes. Yeah, exactly. It just can't make up its mind. Tonight it was super warm. It was a perfect night for trick-or-treating, I have to say. But it just sucks that we had to do it the night before Halloween. That's a bitch. I mean, I was getting mad about it at first, but then I was like, does it really matter?
Well, my wife is one of those people that she's like, she would sign the petition or vote for Halloween being moved to the week, the Saturday before, because it's been literally on a weekday, it seems like, for several years now, and that really makes it hard to go out and enjoy. When you and I were kids, and Vic too, it always usually happened on the weekend because that's the best time to go do it, haunted houses, and then go trick-or-treating, stay out till 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever, get your candy, go home, eat it, get sick as shit, and then there you go,
Well, I want to say I'm opposed to changing Halloween, but if they do, as long as it stays in October, I'll be okay. You know what I mean?
Right. I'm the same way. I don't like them changing it, but I also don't like the fact that I can't really take my kids out on a weeknight because they have school the next day, so it's not like I can keep them out late. So it's been a bit problematic these past few years.
It's an interesting time in our country. There's a lot of changes going on, and this is just one of those things to where there's people like me that are resistant to change. But then when you really look at it, it's like, why? You know what I mean? Like, I can't really explain why other than tradition. I don't have any other reason.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things, I guess, left over from when we were kids and we thought that, things were never going to change like they were. I mean, who would have thought that, when we were kids, we would be thinking about 2018 and what would be going on there. I bet we would have never dreamed in our wildest dreams that things that are happening now were going to happen. We would have thought, oh, it's something you see in some fucked up movie, But here we are, and here it is.
Yep,
so
I
it sort
agree
of
with
fits in
you.
with the topic of discussion tonight, doesn't it?
It does indeed. And, that's the interesting thing about tonight is that we're fucking 80-year anniversary of this thing. It's crazy. Obviously, if you guys saw the description, we're talking about the War of the Worlds 80th anniversary tonight. And, of course, I'm talking about the radio broadcast, not the actual book, which, of course, was written 1898 by H.G. Wells. But, of course, it inspired the Orson Welles radio broadcast on October 30th, 1938. And here we are 80 years later talking about the famous broadcast taking place in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. And, Blake, I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before because, I talk so much that it's hard not to mention just about everything in my life. I went to Grover's Mill about 8 years ago now. It was a little town. They had a cool little coffee shop called Grover's Mill Coffee. Had all sorts of War of the Worlds stuff inside of there, and then they had a monument, like in the Grover's Mill Park or by their pond or whatever, and it's got, where the Martians landed. Really neat stuff, just fun for me, and in 20 years I plan to go back for the 100-year anniversary. I was really sad I didn't get to be there this past week for the festivities. They had a whole lot going on there. It's kind of their little claim to fame.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and again, I think that in 20 years, the 100th anniversary is quite a memorable and significant special time to be there. I have not been, but again, there's lots of things that I'm about to start doing that I haven't done before as far as traveling and seeing places. And I was kind of inspired by your trip to Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
so, which I'm sure that was amazing. Oh,
you and your wife would love it. Telling you.
I'm sure of it. I discovered something that I don't know that you know, because a lot of people don't know it, about a place that's it's a haunted house, one of those haunted attractions where you're supposed to get your money back. I don't know if you're familiar with it. We may not have time to get into it right now, but remind me towards the end of the show. I have to tell you this story because it will creep you out, man.
Okay, absolutely. I'll try to remember it. I've begun drinking, so we'll see how that will. How that
well,
goes.
I'll remember it because I haven't been drinking, so
Fair enough. Well, so Blake, there's one of two places that I've heard of War of the Worlds. Okay, when I was a kid, the first time I heard about War of the Worlds. Now, obviously, War of the Worlds has been around my entire life, and then 3 generations before that. But there was a TV show called War of the Worlds, and I think it came on NBC. In fact, fuck it, I'll look it up and find out when it came on and, what year.
So Wikipedia you go.
Yeah, exactly. War of the Worlds, NBC. That's what I'm trying to look at. But, of course, it's not so easy. War of the Worlds TV show. How about that for my Google search here? Okay, so there's a TV series from 1988 to 1990. And I remember War of the Worlds, the TV show. So that was probably the first time I'd heard of it. I was 6 years old whenever it came out. And it was really weird, but it was one of those shows like Tour of Duty, which I think it aired back-to-back on, where major characters, and this is before Walking Dead, would die. You know what I mean? They would die week after week. So it wasn't the type of thing that you had seen, like in the 80s. And for me, it was a huge deal, especially as a 6-year-old kid. It blew my fucking mind that you had these constant characters getting wiped out. So that was really where my knowledge of War of the Worlds came from. Now, it's nothing like, like the story and the radio broadcast or anything. It's just the words War of the Worlds stuck in my head after that. But there's another place where my War of the Worlds knowledge had come from as a child, and this is a movie, and Blake, I don't know if you ever saw this movie. It was called Space Invaders from 1990. Have you ever seen that movie?
I believe I have. It's one of those cheesy kind of, yeah.
Yes. That's the one. Well,
I think I have.
just give everybody a little plot of it real quick that's never seen it. Dim-witted Martians drop into a little Illinois town on the day that the local radio station happens to rebroadcast Orson Welles' 1938 War of the Worlds. And they think it's for real, and that they think that they're being directed to attack Earth. So it's a little comedy, but it's good stuff, at least as far as I remember. I haven't seen it probably, I don't know, 25 years probably. I'd have to watch it again and see how it is. It gets 5.3 on IMDb, so it's not universally beloved or anything, but it feels like something I watched a lot as a kid. So anyway, those are my 2 main influences from War of the Worlds, at least in my childhood. What about you, Blake? Do you remember maybe even the first time you had heard anything like War of the Worlds when you were a child?
I do. I was reading about it in an English book. I was in school and I was reading about radio broadcast and reading about the power of radio before television broke into the mainstream and sort of became everybody's go-to media source. And we were reading about adaptations. That was one of the subjects: adaptations of books done for screen, for radio, and like for stage. So that came up, and it happened to be where the description of it it enamored me. It was like, wow, this was done in such a way that people actually believed this was happening, And when you listen to the original broadcast, which I was listening to some of it before I finished Dahmer, you hear the way that it's done. No commercial breaks really, and when there is a commercial break, it's an announcer letting you know this, and that, and they're giving you names of people. Professor Pearson, who's an astronomer and astrologer. They give you all these names, and it sounds legitimate. And the way it's done, speaks to the power of Orson Welles as an actor and an orator, because I don't think it would have been quite as resonant with people as it has been were it not for him doing that, doing the radio broadcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it was part of their anthology series, the Mercury Theater on the Air. And if you look up Mercury Theater on the Air, there's a website with all the Mercury Theater on the Air broadcasts, including War of the Worlds. So you can listen to that for free right now, or you can go to YouTube, or you can look it up on whatever your podcast server is. It's all over the place. It's free, public domain. You and I could go out and make a War of the Worlds movie right now if we wanted to. It's kind of like House on Haunted Hill. It's kind of like Night of the Living Dead. It is, public domain, like I said. So Orson Welles, he takes over this thing and decides he's going to do a Mercury Theater on the Air production of it. But he kind of spins it on its head a little bit, and he does it in the form of he changes it from London or England, where the original War of the Worlds took place, the book, and he moves it to Grover's Mill, New Jersey, by Trenton, New Jersey, or by Princeton. And so he's doing this broadcast on the CBS radio network. And, of course, it's their Halloween episode, again, Sunday, October 30th, 1938. And, again, it's the way they do it, the way it's presented. If you're not listening from the start, you could totally see how somebody could get sucked into this thing and think it's the real deal, especially if you changed over from another channel. And keep in mind, we had the war scare going on at the time, too, World War II.
Oh, yeah, and in the broadcast, they talk about, the war scare is kind of subsiding a little bit. Men are getting their jobs back and working more. And if they'd done a poll, and 32 million people were listening by radio, because that was the main form of entertainment outside of reading, going to see like a play or something. It was radio. People had radios. It was easy to get a radio. They weren't terribly expensive. And you'd sit and listen as a family on the weekend, on the evenings, listen to the president talk or whatever. They used to call them the fireside chat. And then, you could listen to stuff like this and The Shadow and, Superman and all this other stuff. So, yeah, that was the mainstream form of communication and entertainment. So I think I give him all the credit in the world for being diligent enough to and intelligent enough to see that for what it could be.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's the interesting thing about it is that, and you hit the nail on the head there. It's important to remember that in 1938, the primary method of entertainment was definitely radio. Everybody had a radio in their home. Not everybody had a TV in their home yet. So, just like in, let's say, A Christmas Story, where Ralphie gathers around the radio and listens to Little Orphan Annie. It's the same deal here.
Yeah.
Families would gather around the radio, and this is a perfect example of that. Now, if you're like listening to this radio program from the start, obviously you're not going to get sucked in the same way, because it starts out with it's kind of a prologue. It's read by Orson Welles, and it's really close to the opening of H.G. Wells' novel. But, like Blake was talking about, the next hour of the broadcast, or half hour of the broadcast, was actually presented like in any other evening radio program, which is kind of interrupted by a series of news bulletins. And this is really what pulls people in to make them think it's real. And whether people thought that the Nazis were invading or they thought that aliens were invading, they thought some shit was going down regardless. And again, the amount of people who were panicked by this is in dispute, and it will always be in dispute. You're not going to be able to prove this. There's reports that the newspapers definitely blew that out of proportion. But we do know for a fact that there was something going on there. So, we can at least agree with that. Regardless